Your brain paid you before you even pressed play. Documented science, published, verified. The moment you decided to put on a show you've seen before, something you loved, maybe from years ago, your brain released dopamine. Not during the show, not after the credits, before. Before anything started, your nervous system was already paying you for the choice. It was expecting pleasure, and it rewarded you up front. Now, for most people, this just means TV is relaxing. But for you, specifically the person born somewhere between 1965 and 1980, this goes way deeper. And the reason it goes deeper starts when you were about 6 years old. I've been studying how Gen X relates to television and movies differently from every other generation. Not just what you watch, why? And the answer isn't what most people think. So let's start at the beginning. The real beginning. You used to wake up before everyone else, not because anyone told you to, not because you had somewhere to be. You woke up because of cartoons. The parents were still asleep, the house was still dark, and you were up, bowl in hand, parked in front of the TV like you had a job to do. Here's how confirmed this is. Reddit asked the Reddit/Gen X community, what's the most Gen X thing? 5,000 people responded, and right near the top of the list, next to recording songs off the radio onto a cassette, was that exact thing, waking up Saturday morning for cartoons. 5,000 people, one memory, like your whole generation lived in the same house. Now, why does that one ritual stick with you so deeply? Why, out of everything that happened in childhood, is Saturday morning cartoons the thing that can stop a conversation dead and make a room full of grown adults feel like they're 7 years old again? Psychologists have a name for this. It's called the endowment effect. Simple idea. Things feel more valuable when they're hard to get. And Saturday morning cartoons were genuinely hard to get. They aired once a week. There was no rewind, no streaming, no YouTube clip available at 2 a.m. If you missed the episode, it was just gone. Maybe you'd catch a rerun in 6 months, maybe not. That scarcity made each episode feel precious. Your brain filed it that way. But there's a second thing happening at the same time. Psychologists call it communal reinforcement. The idea that when other people share in an experience with you, your brain stores it bigger, more real, more meaningful. Monday morning at school, you didn't talk about the weather. You talked about whatever went down on Saturday. Whether Skeletor actually had a good point this time, whether G.I. Joe was really going to win the war or just tease you forever, whether Scooby-Doo and the gang were ever actually scared or just really good at acting. The show was social currency. And the fact that you all watched the same thing at the same time, with no algorithm, no watch next recommendation, no personalized feed, it created a shared reference point that bonded an entire generation. You didn't choose Saturday morning cartoons. They happened to you, and your brain remembered them as something that happened to all of you together. He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, the Smurfs, DuckTales a little later, and on NBC Saturday mornings in the 80s, Alvin and the Chipmunks yelling, "Alvin!" loud enough to wake up the neighbor's dog. Those weren't just cartoons. Those were the opening chapter of a lifelong relationship with the screen. And the terms of that relationship got set in those early years in a very specific way. The TV showed up every week at the same time, with a story that began, moved forward, and ended every time. File that away. We're coming back to it. Now here's what happened after school. The house was quiet. Maybe your parents were still at work. Maybe a sibling was somewhere. And you turned on the TV. If you were in elementary school in the late 70s or early 80s, your afternoon lineup looked something like this. Brady Bunch reruns, Little House on the Prairie, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, The Flintstones, maybe some local channel running old westerns. These shows weren't glamorous, but here's what they all had in common. They were predictable. You knew roughly what was going to happen. The family was going to have a problem. Someone was going to make a mistake. By the end, it was going to be okay. Every time. A psychology research article published in 2025 puts it plainly. The brain craves predictability. Predictability lowers the brain's internal alarm system. It reduces what's called cognitive load, basically how hard your brain has to work to figure out what's happening and whether it's safe. When you already know what happens next, your brain doesn't have to stay on guard. It can just be there, comfortable, not braced for anything. And for a kid growing up in a world where a lot of big adult things were happening that nobody was properly explaining, this mattered, more than it probably should have had to. The TV became a companion, not a replacement for anything, but a reliable presence. It was always there. It always made sense. It never left without giving you a proper ending first. Now here's something worth sitting with for a second, because this is where Gen X's relationship with TV gets specific in a way that doesn't apply to the generations before or after. Baby boomers grew up with 3 channels and parents who mostly controlled the set. Millennials grew up with the internet already competing for your attention. Gen X sat right in the middle, old enough to have TV be the main event, young enough to have it feel like yours. Your parents weren't crowded around the TV the way their parents had been around the radio, and your kids would eventually have a phone in their pocket by age 12. But you had the TV in the living room, and nobody else was using it between 3 and 5 p.m. That window was yours, and your brain knew it. Now, fast forward to middle school. Middle school is when the shows got bigger and louder. He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers, DuckTales, Knight Rider, MacGyver, The A-Team. That is a lineup. That is a real lineup. Each one of these shows had a hero with a code, a team with different strengths, a mission that mattered, and a clear-cut answer to what the right thing to do looked like. He-Man literally ended every single episode by walking up to the camera and giving you a life lesson. G.I. Joe closed every episode with a public service announcement. They weren't subtle about it. They treated you like someone worth talking to directly. And you were paying attention, every word. After school became prime time. The Cosby Show, Family Ties, Growing Pains, Cheers. These were shows where the adults seemed like people you might actually want to be someday, where the humor was smarter, where the problems were messier but still somehow got resolved by the last commercial break. Now, Cheers deserves a moment here, because Cheers ran from 1982 to 1993, 11 seasons. And for Gen X, it was the first show where the bar, the actual bar full of actual flawed adults, felt more honest than the families on every other show. Nobody on Cheers was trying to teach you a lesson at the end of the episode. They were just people, stuck with each other, figuring it out. That was new, and Gen X responded to it in a way that showed up in the ratings every single week for over a decade. But in 1981, something happened that rewired your generation more than any single TV show could. MTV launched, August 1st, 1981. For the first time in history, you could watch music. Not just hear it, see it. And the way your brain responds to music paired with visuals is fundamentally different from either one alone. The combination hits the reward system harder. It plants the memory deeper. That's why you can hear 8 notes of a song from 1986 and know exactly where you were when you first heard it. Your brain wasn't just watching, it was building a permanent record. You recorded music videos off MTV onto VHS tapes. Hit record, wait, rewind, watch again. You were doing that before anyone had a word for saved content. And then high school arrived, and the shows got serious. When you hit high school, the TV changed with you. Saved by the Bell, Beverly Hills 90210, The Fresh Prince, Seinfeld, The Simpsons, Roseanne. And if you were on the older end of Gen X, Twin Peaks in 1990 on network television. Nothing was ever quite the same after that. But let's stay with the shows that hit the widest, because The Simpsons, when it debuted in 1989, did something genuinely new. It made the messy American family funny, not inspirational, not something to aspire to, just real and funny and flawed, and somehow still together. Homer Simpson was not a role model, and the show was honest about that. And Gen X loved it immediately. Part of why The Simpsons landed so hard for Gen X specifically is that Gen X had spent their entire childhood watching TV families that solved problems in 22 minutes with a hug. The Bradys, the Keatons, the Seavers. Warm, tidy, lessons were learned. And then The Simpsons walked in and said, what if the dad was kind of an idiot? The mom was quietly holding everything together, the kid was a chaos agent, and nobody actually learned anything. Gen X didn't just laugh at that, they exhaled. Because that was closer to what a lot of households actually looked like. Fresh Prince gave you something different. It gave you a show where the outsider, the kid from a different world who doesn't fit the mold, was the one you were rooting for. Where the tension between where you came from and where you ended up wasn't smoothed over or ignored. It sat right there in the middle of the story, every week. Beverly Hills 90210 turned high school into something almost mythological. Problems that felt impossibly large, friendships that felt permanent, stakes that felt real, and a soundtrack that hit you before you even knew you were being hit. Now, here's the part that science actually backs up, and it explains why these specific shows, the ones you watched between roughly ages 10 and 20, hit differently than anything you've watched since. Psychologists call it the reminiscence bump. The basic finding is this: memories formed during your teenage years and early adulthood get stored with more emotional weight than memories from any other period of your life. Your brain during those years is changing fast, experiencing things for the first time, building identity, and it files those experiences with a different kind of urgency. What that means for you is straightforward. The shows you watched in high school are not just memories, they are emotional landmarks. When you hear the Beverly Hills 90210 theme, you're not just remembering a show, you're feeling 1992. You're smelling the decade, the specific locker-lined hallway of the specific year it was when you first watched it. Neuroscience backs this up completely. Those memories were stored with more dopamine attached to them than the memories you're making right now. That's just how the brain works during those years. And here's the chain reaction that creates. When you rewatch one of those shows as an adult, or when you watch something new that reminds you of the feeling of those years, your brain fires the same reward pathways, same nostalgia loop, same dopamine. It's automatic. You didn't decide to feel that way. Your brain decided for you. Which brings us to right now. You have access to more television than any human being who has ever lived. Every show ever made, every movie, every documentary, every season of every series all at once, anytime you want. And what are you watching? Yellowstone, Succession, Ozark, Better Call Saul, true crime documentaries at 11 p.m., and probably at least one show you've already seen before that you're watching again in the background while doing something else. A 2025 industry report backed this up with numbers. Old shows dominate streaming hours. Grey's Anatomy, which first aired in 2005, accumulated 3.5 billion viewing hours on streaming between 2021 and 2025. Stranger Things, with all its cultural noise, hit 1.7 billion. The older content wins, by a lot. Gen X plays a big role in this. Research from Media Culture described Gen X's streaming habits as a preference for quality storytelling and nostalgia. That's a viewer who grew up watching real storytelling and can tell the difference between something built with care and something thrown together on a Tuesday. Now here's something worth noting about the shows Gen X gravitates toward as adults. Yellowstone, Succession, Ozark, The Sopranos. What do these shows have in common? They're all about power, loyalty, and the cost of the choices you make. They're not simple. Nobody in them is purely good or purely bad, the same way life at 50 looks nothing like life at 15. These shows reflect the world the way you actually know it now: messy, complicated, occasionally darkly funny, and very, very hard to look away from. Gen X watched shows in childhood that told them what the rules were, and now they watch shows that ask what happens when people break them. That's not a coincidence. That's a generation that paid attention long enough to get interested in the harder questions. But here's something interesting that's happened recently. Earlier this year, someone posted in r/Gen X about rewatching Ferris Bueller's Day Off with their kids. The kids thought it was hilarious. The Gen X parent sat there feeling something different, uncomfortable. The guy who was the coolest person in the world when they were 14 looked through adult eyes kind of selfish, kind of manipulative, like someone who gets everything and never really pays for it. That post got thousands of responses because it wasn't just one parent. It was a generation recognizing together that the thing they loved when they were young meant something different now. The nostalgia is still there, but Gen X nostalgia isn't the soft focus, uncomplicated kind anymore. It's sharper now. It's got questions attached to it, which is actually a sign of a generation that's been paying attention this whole time. All right, here's what all of this adds up to. You've had a relationship with television and film for your entire conscious life. It started when you were small and someone else's shows were on, and you sat down and watched them, and something in your nervous system said, "This is good, this is safe, this makes sense." And as the years stacked up, Saturday morning cartoons that were precious because they were rare, after-school shows that were reliable when nothing else was, MTV that tattooed music and imagery directly onto your memory, high school shows that burned into the part of your brain that keeps the most important stuff, and now streaming queues filled with things that remind you of all of it. Your brain built a system, and that system has been running for 40 years. Now here's the thing most people get wrong about this. People assume that loving TV, really loving it, the way Gen X loves it, is some kind of weakness, like you're running away from something, like you can't handle reality and need a screen to cope. But the research says something different. Psychologists who study why people rewatch familiar content found that the primary thing those viewers are after isn't escape, it's control. In a world that is genuinely unpredictable, where jobs change and relationships shift and news is always alarming and your phone has 17 notifications before you've had coffee, the ability to choose something where you already know how it ends is not a small thing. It's a decision to put your nervous system somewhere safe for a while. And your brain, which has been doing this since age 6, knows exactly what to do with that choice. Dopamine before the show starts, reward during, calm after. Every time, without fail. There's also something else going on that doesn't get talked about enough. When you grew up, TV was an event. You watched it live. You watched it together. You couldn't pause it, skip ahead, or watch it on a plane 6 months later. That meant the experience of watching and the experience of living happened side by side. The show was on during dinner, during homework, during arguments, during good years and bad ones. So when you go back to those shows, or when you find new ones that carry the same weight, you're not just watching something, you're locating yourself in time. You're checking in with a version of yourself that still exists somewhere in the filing system. That's not escapism, that's orientation. What you built, starting at age 6 without knowing you were building anything, was a relationship with storytelling. One that started before you had words for it, was shaped by the specific way your generation experienced scarcity and community and ritual, and it's still running, steady, every time you sit down and press play. So the next time someone gives you a look for rewatching The Sopranos for the 3rd time, or staying up too late finishing one more episode of something you already know the ending to, go ahead and press play. Your nervous system earned it. Hey, glad you made it till the end. Before you leave, kindly smash the like and subscribe button below. We'd love to have you here. And check out this video on the screen next. I'll see you there.